Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the Oregon Farm to School Grant webinar. Today, Rick will be moderating and I will be helping him. You do have the option to use the chat feature if you have questions, so please feel free to do that. During the presentation, we will not be able to hear you as your lines are muted, but again, feel free to ask any questions in the chat features. Rick?
Okay, yeah, thank you everybody. Welcome to an encore live performance of the Oregon Farm to School Procurement Grant. We are going to record this and we will post it on the website. There's already the last live performance we did. We already have a recording on there, a YouTube recording of it, but this will replace that one as this will be new and improved. You know, I made a couple little tweaks to slides to make it flow better. And I've incorporated some of the questions that we've received before into a couple of the slides, but nothing earth-shattering. But anyway, so yeah, we're going to start. This will take an hour. I'll talk for about 40-45 minutes, very fast. That's why it might be nice to go back and watch a recording later if I talk too fast. There's a lot of information here, but we'll have a time, as Karen said, at the end for questions and answers. So without further ado, we will start. Okay, next slide. Okay, before we get too far, all materials, including this recorded webinar, will be found on the Oregon Farm to School website. You don't need to write this down. If you're lucky enough to get an email from me, you'll have that on the bottom of every one of my emails. But you go there and you'll click on, actually it's the Oregon Farm to School Grant. I'll show you what it looks like on the next slide. If you actually just Google Oregon Farm to School, put that in the Googling box and go to the next slide. Yeah, and you will go to our old website, unfortunately. But if you can see there in the circled part, it's like in size 6 font, very tiny. It says we've moved, click on this link, and that's the same link that's on the bottom of all my emails. If you click on that, you will go to the real Farm to School site. And so the Farm to School site is right there, and at the very top of it, it says Oregon Farm to School Grant. That's what you want to click on. If you get there, so again, this is the main Farm to School page. Yeah, and then you'll, we want to back up one. There we go. And so what we want to talk about is going to be on the left-hand side, which is the Oregon Farm to School Procurement Grant, and we will be talking about all of that stuff. So now, yeah. The other thing here is, what does that, you'll have to excuse me because on my computer it's very small and I have my readers on. Okay, yeah. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Karen. I have the slides out of order on this time, but basically the most important thing is keep checking the website for updates as things do change. Particularly the frequently asked questions document. If I get any questions, I add to that and put an updated date on there. If there's something that earth-shatteringly happens, a change to the grant, which can happen, as I'll explain later in the webinar, I'll send out our preferred method of communication is our listserv, and so you need to sign up for that. So it's in 2 places. If you can back up one, on the Farm to School Grant webpage, there's a link there says to sign up for the webserv. Now forward twice. And also on the main Farm to School Grant page at the bottom. So it's in a couple different places. You can't miss it. So please sign up for the listserv. If there's any changes, this is how we like to let everybody know. Okay. Okay, so there's one chance to sign up for this grant. It's for both school years. It's for this school year, 2017-18, and next school year, 2018-19. We said that in our announcements, in our, when it went out in the ODE Child Nutrition newsletter and other email announcements I've gotten. We've done this for a couple reasons. Number one, most school districts have been acclimated to this. They know what's going on. We had 141 school districts apply last year, which were most of the major school districts in Oregon. The ones that didn't apply were the very tiny ones, typically, that where the food service director is also the superintendent and the cook and the janitor. And they didn't care to do any paperwork for a very, very small amount. Typically, you know, those tiny districts would only get $200 or $300. So if we're able to have both years, we didn't split the funds in half, and therefore your award would be ostensibly doubled. And so it makes it a little bit more enticing for the smaller districts to say, oh, instead of $200 to $300, it might be $400 to $600. So it's a little bit more money to play with to start out. So that was another thing, another reason we did. So the opt-in period has passed, and so welcome to the grant. So today's agenda, we're going to go over some changes from previous years, an overview. We're going to go through a timeline. We're going to go through a reimbursement process and requirements, some allowable and unallowable costs, and then we're going to talk about reporting, and then we'll have questions at the end. Okay, so this bill gets us authority from House Bill 2038, which was just passed. It directs ODE to award grants to Oregon school districts for reimbursements of costs incurred in purchasing Oregon food products that meet certain criteria, and for funding for food-based, agriculture-based, and garden-based educational activity. Which brings me to the next slide. The purpose of today's webinar is for the Food Procurement Grant available to all Oregon school districts. We have other webinars going on concurrently. This is our third in 4 webinars in 5 days. So we have education grants going on and procurement grants. Matter of fact, our next education grant is going to be Monday. So if you're here for the education grant, I mean, that's fine if you want to sit in, but this is for the food procurement grant. So the education grant is a competitive grant for food, agriculture, or garden-based educational activities that is available not only to school districts, but a host of other folks as well. So if you want more information on that, please refer to the grant webpage for that. And I encourage school districts to apply for it. So anyway, okay, so what is different this time? We're going to talk a very, very brief history. When I first came here in 2012 was when this grant started. We were awarded $200,000. It was a competitive grant for both the education portion and the procurement portion together. And then the next biennium, which was 2013-15 there, we had $1.2 million. And again, it was 80% for food purchasing, 20% for the educational activities, and it was all a competitive grant still. Then the next one, which was the school year that just ended, that biennium, we had $3.3 million added more to the total, bringing the total to $4.5 million. So this time it got separated into 2 portions like we currently are in now. So a separate non-competitive grant for all school districts to purchase, to get reimbursed for all Oregon grown and processed food, and then the competitive grant for education, which brings us to now. The bill got signed. It got retained at $4.5 million. So we've retained our amount. We're very happy about that we're able to continue this. So that's where we are right now. So who can participate in this grant? Any public Oregon school food authority can participate that participates in the National School Lunch Program, and charter schools can if they also participate in the National School Lunch Program as well. In order to determine a level playing field, NSLP numbers are used to determine the amount of funding for each school district. Therefore, if your school district did not participate in the NSLP, it cannot be eligible. Having said that, though, however, we use the NSLP numbers to determine the amount you get, the award amount, but you can use the award amount in any CNP program: lunch, breakfast, snacks, summer meals, etc. So the grant process was a SurveyMonkey, which is done. Thank you very much. You've opted in now. And the other thing that needs to be done is attending a training webinar or view a recorded version, and you're doing that now. So an email was sent to the SFAs last week with your award amount. It comes out to basically, we took the giant award that was available, $3.8 million, and divided that into all the National School Lunch Program lunch numbers of the eligible or the opt-in schools from last year. It came out to over 8 cents a meal. And so then we took that 8 cents per meal and multiplied it by your lunches you served last year to come up with your award amount. So we showed you your award amount, and then we had links to the website, which has the following: an agreement letter that needs to be signed and returned to ODE, me anyway, an attestation form, which is a fancy term for saying that you've attended the training and you understand what's going on. And then there's a baseline data report that needs to be returned to me, but only for newbies, for new program sponsors. There's about 15 of them this year. But if you've already been in the program, you don't need to do a baseline. You can take a little bit of time off on that. And then there's also links to an Excel claim form and a summary of allowable expenses, some grant reporting requirements, and whatnot on the resources section too. So, and if you lost it, a generic letter of your award letter is available on our website as well. It'll have everything but your award amount, but it shows how much we what the figure is, what we used it, so you can go back and you can look at it there. Okay, so I get this question a lot. When can we start utilizing funds? You can start, you purchase food as you normally do using your procurement system that you do. You use federal funds to purchase food, but you get reimbursed from us with state funds. So you're using both state and federal funds in this system. But you can start purchasing food at any time, but as soon as we get the agreement in place and the attestation form and you're set up in EGIMS, we will be able to start doing reimbursements. Now, we have to actually build the EGIMS system, electronic grant management system, which basically lifts all of your school districts and the amounts in there, and I have to have an assistant do that, and I'm currently operating without an assistant right now, but I have other people that's graciously helping me. So as soon as we get everybody set up, it usually takes a week or two. You guys will be good to go. But again, I need your agreement form and your attestation form. And then you can use items you bought up to your opening orders in this July, but we can't reimburse for anything in previous school years. Okay, so again, you're there today, right now is it says training option 1. This is actually training option 2 that's going on right now. We will get this uploaded to our website soon, later today. September 26th was the first. We are training option 2 right now. So we will get that recorded. Next. Okay. October 30th is the baseline report due date for first-time grantees that I mentioned before, for those 15 or so school districts that are new. We have a progress report that's due for everybody, and this is to track all of your Oregon food, not only for the grant, but for all Oregon purchases. But that will be due next year at this time, a year from now exactly. How about that? So you'll have a year to do that. And then all funds must be processed in EGIMS by the end of the school year in 2019. That's a long ways off, I know, but the funds will be liquidated after that date. So you have until the end of the school year to buy food in 2019, but then we can't hold funds over, so the funds, have to be spent by the end of the year. It looks really bad for us to go to legislature to say, oh, we didn't spend all the money, but can we have more? So that's my job. I do a good job in ensuring that everybody spends their money. If you don't spend your money, we will be talking. So, and then the last date there, September 30th, the final report is due. And both of these reports, the progress report and the final report, even though they're, the Survey Monkey links won't be activated just yet, there are PDF copies of them on the website right now, so you can print them out because we will be asking you to report on all Oregon purchases. And so it's, then we're asking you to keep track of that stuff. It's good to have them handy so you can not wait till the last minute. It will help out a lot. Okay, all right, next page. Reimbursement worksheet. Okay, these are resources available on our website. And so below the required items is a resources section, and on there is the reimbursement worksheet, frequently asked questions document, the baseline reporting survey, which I already talked about, the PDF copies of the progress of the final and final reports, which I just talked about, and also tips and tools to help you do those reports. There's a lot of tips and tools. There's a tracking document to help you keep track of local purchases, as well as a document on how to fill it out, and as well as the tips and tools to help you do the reports. So that is all on there. The frequently asked questions document, like I said, any questions from this webinar or any emails or phone calls I get in, any new questions that haven't been brought up yet, I make sure I put on that document and update it on the website. Next page. Okay, requirements for reimbursement. Districts will need to work with vendors to be able to identify which products are Oregon grown and produced. Obviously, that's not necessary for local farms. If there's a local farm, that's, you don't need to identify, hey, which of yours are Oregon grown, because everything on a local farm is going to be Oregon grown, obviously. But for distributors, they pull in food from all over the world, so they can work with you. Now, in the years past, they have provided local reports that have said, okay, here are your Oregon purchases. You can use those reports in place of your invoices because they summarize everything, but we have to be careful about that stuff. You take those reports and you can put them on your Excel reimbursement sheet, but sometimes the distributors get it wrong. I've gotten lots of wacky things on there, like California oranges and Mandarin oranges and imported Belgian chocolate and Washington apples, and it'll say right on there, California oranges, and it's like, really? So sometimes you have to just not assume that everything is correct there, and I'm working with them. I've already gotten calls from a couple of distributors as our rules have changed of what's allowable and what's not. So we're working on that, but that's a good place to start. The process for reimbursement has been updated since last year a bit, but you will still put items on an Excel claim form, fill out all the information on there and email it to me, and then I'll tell you what to do. You put the stuff into an amount into the EGM system. I'll go over that in detail later. You can claim items for this grant, but you can't claim the same individual item for fresh fruit and veggie program or the pilot project for procurement of fresh fruits and veggies. That would be double or triple dipping, and it's just don't do that. That's against the rules. So you can claim any item in any one of these areas, but you can't reclaim them in multiple areas. So I suggest you fill out a monthly claim. You don't have to, and I'll tell you why here. A lot of grants require you to do a monthly claim, but the nature of the beast in the Oregon Farm to School grant is that sometimes things aren't available every single month, like in the winter or whatever, if you're choosing to just focus on fruits and veggies rather than beef or whatever. So, I allow some latitude, and I've been able to manage this process. You don't have to submit monthly. It works out better. I suggest that you do, and some of the most successful programs do monthly reimbursement claims, so that's great. But as long as you're making adequate progress, what I don't like to see is having somebody not put anything for 7 months and then and have no activity going on. If that happens, we'll be talking. So yeah, I like this as long as adequate process is being made. And what is adequate process? I'll define that right now. We need to make sure that all the funds are being spent, like I said. So we've defined that adequate process as halfway through the grant, half of your funds should be spent. 3/4 of the way through the grant, 3/4 should be spent. Typically what happens is I have my assistant keep track of that number. She'll have a little on our spreadsheet that we use to keep track of all the school districts. We have your grant amount, and we say, okay, what's the halfway point of your grant? And if your running total is below that, we'll start sending out what we call nastygrams or friendly email reminders. After you need to communicate with us what your situation is and what your plan is for spending. But in some cases where either the folks don't want to participate anymore or it's just become clear you're going to have trouble spending it, we will take money back and reallocate it to school districts, other ones. There are plenty of school districts that have no problems spending the funds, and they are screaming for more money. And so we have opportunities to spend the money, and so we will use those opportunities. We need to make sure we're spending the money. We want to give you every opportunity first, and we will, and we'll work with you to do that. But if it's clear that adequate progress isn't being made, we'll take money back. Okay, now we're going to get into, before I get into the Excel spreadsheet, I want to talk about allowable and unallowable costs first for this webinar. And the terms I want you to zero in on here are the ones in blue here: supplanting, intent of the grant, processed, and minimally processed. So just keep those. I'm going to be hitting those next. Starting with supplanting. Local food can be more expensive. The intent of the grant is supposed to give you funds that you can purchase Oregon food that you normally couldn't afford to purchase. Okay, so supplanting means that you would simply, and I changed this in another version, but it didn't make it in here, but it means that you would replace or what's the other word I put in there? Anyway, replace what was normally, or displace, that was it, displace. Replace or displace products that would be on the tray anyway. So this became evident and back in the day when we first started this grant was a competitive grant. And where the spending was fine and it was in line with the intent of the grant, because the people that applied with it were what I called my farm to school rock stars that understood farm to school and this intent of not supplanting and being able to buy food that you wouldn't normally purchase. But when it was opened up to the entire state, the spending habits switched, and it switched quite alarmingly. And so I raised the issue and I took it to spoke at OSNA about this. I spoke at our School Garden Summit to 40 food service directors. I spoke, I think about 6 or 7 times. I had a webinar, and I've been letting people know, so it should be no surprise, but basically we said we need to really try to follow the intent of the grant, or there could be changes. And sure enough, the people that wrote the bill for this grant did allow for some of these changes. So I'll talk about some of those. But I wanted to make sure that people realize that the things that are on the tray anyway, if we stop reimbursing for those items, the school district still will buy them. They're a normal thing that's purchased, so it doesn't hurt the Oregon economy because the school district still buys them. They just won't be able to use the funds, the grant funds, to buy what they're already been buying, what they've always bought, and what they will continue to buy. But now they can use it for the intended purpose of buying foods that they normally wouldn't be able to purchase. Okay. We're in the process of defining these rules with the State Board of Education for these allowable costs. The next slides will detail the allowable and unallowable costs. If for some reason the administrative rules change and alter these rules, we will notify the sponsors and change the materials on the website. Okay, so yeah, there we go. Allowable costs for food. So these are allowable costs. Produced, which means grown, raised, or caught in Oregon, which means Oregon grown fruits and veggies in their whole or processed form. Oregon raised meat, processed or unprocessed. Oregon caught seafood, processed or unprocessed. This is actually no change from the past versions of this grant. Anything grown, raised, or caught in Oregon still counts. Anything produced, grown, raised in Oregon, still in Oregon, continued here. Dairy products such as cheese and yogurt made from Oregon cows, we've always allowed that. Grains grown in Oregon. Bakery products made from Oregon wheat. And to my knowledge, there aren't many bakery products made from Oregon wheat. There's only a couple, like Camas Country Mills maybe, that does some of this. Pendleton Flour does some flour. It's not a bakery product, but Ankeny Lakes Wild Rice does some grain products that is Oregon grown, but they're very small, kind of boutique-y places. None of the mainline distributors have so far included Oregon grown wheat in their products. But if there is any products made from Oregon grown wheat, they would count. Milk still does not count. It never did in the grant in half-pint containers, but we've made sure to stipulate that it's allowable to use milk in things other than half-pint containers for cooking, like gallons, half gallons, whatever, and alternative milks, dry milk for cooking, things like that. They're not normally on the tray, so they would count. So we wanted to make sure to include those. Another category here is more than minimally processed. I want to talk about the difference between processed and minimally processed here. So minimally processed means the food was processed in a manner that didn't fundamentally alter the product, and the product remains its inherent character. So it's basically chopping, cutting, slicing, dicing, freezing, drying, shucking, grinding, just forming them into patties, but not adding ingredients to them and making the ingredients into another thing or canning them or anything like that. So just minimally processed means just basically, for our purposes, cutting and chopping, usually. But anyway, more than minimally processed items in Oregon count, such as applesauce, juice, veggie, fruit puree, hummus, salsa, cheese, yogurt, cottage cheese, all those dairy products, pizza, entrees, granola that are, entrees that are made in Oregon, tortillas, chips, flour processed in Oregon. Like I said, the aforementioned Pendleton Mills. And also both produced and processed in Oregon. Obviously, we talked about both those categories, and they would still be true if we put them together. Oregon grown fruits and veggies, still Oregon raised meat, Oregon caught seafood, as well as dairy products such as cheese and yogurt made from Oregon cows, Oregon grown grains, bakery products made from Oregon grown wheat. Same like I said before. Whoops, I went too far. Okay. Unallowable costs. So the things that were very evident in this that were written in to the rules were minimally processed fruits and veggies such as jicama, pineapple, oranges, lettuce, carrots grown in other states, and only minimally processed, like cut and chopped in Oregon. Those items are typically bought anyway, but we're just not going to. We don't want to supplant and displace those foods and just fund what you're already getting on the tray. So fruits and veggies that are cut and chopped in other states, or grown in other states but chopped here. Milk and half-pint cartons, no change from past years on that. And then bread, buns, and rolls made without Oregon wheat. So those three items counted for almost half of the grant reimbursed, I believe. But again, you're buying bread, local bread rolls and buns anyway. But other baked items are like tortillas or other things other than bread, buns, and rolls are fine. And then pan sprains, margarines, and mayonnaise. So that is our list. And I've had a few questions of like, could you publish a list of things that aren't allowable? Well, that was it. That was the main list. And I'll refer to that often, I'm sure, over the next upcoming days, weeks, and months. So there's some good news here is we have flexibility now in other costs. We didn't have this before. In previous years, the bill was written and the rules were written that said we could only reimburse for food. However, it's in the real world, when you buy something like a case of hamburger patties, there are other costs built into that case of hamburger patties, such as transportation, sourcing, and processing of the food, and that they're already just built into that case. So a lot of people can't afford to buy local food because they don't have the labor available to further process it. Like, for instance, when I was in a school district, we did roasted winter vegetables, and my cooks, it was a lot for them. It took them extra time to actually peel squash, dice it, bake it off, and then it wasn't just ripped out of a bag and thrown onto a cookie sheet. You actually had to process it. So now we are able to say we're able to buy more Oregon food if we're allowing people to use some of their labor dollars, reasonable costs for labor dollars to process things themselves. So this is pretty exciting, and we've already had some people that have gotten intrigued by this. So basically, so it allows more flexibility. I'll get into that in the next slides here. So these other costs are labor, transporting of food, and sourcing of food, like I just said. So here's where it gets, where we have some parameters based on this. You must use at least 80% of your grant award to purchase food items. Now you don't have to use just 80%. You can use all 100 and just do what you did in previous years and just buy cases of food, and that's fine. However, if you want to use some of the labor, sourcing, and transportation, you can use up to 20% of your funds to purchase reasonable costs associated with processing, transporting, and sourcing food. Okay, next. So like I already talked about this, labor, sometimes folks can't use whole raw food like carrots, winter squash. Now you can pay for staff time to do that. However, when you do that, we just ask you to say, and I'll go over this in the reimbursement claim form, but it has to be reasonable costs, and you have to say how you're doing it, like, you know, so many hours times this wage plus benefits, you know, and say how you got that figure. You can't just say, oh yeah, I'm gonna just put in all 20% for labor, boom. No, you have to spell it out how it's happening. If you go to pick up food, we had a situation where a guy wanted to buy a whole beef, a whole steer, and they wanted to go to an auction and buy a cow and then get it processed, get it inspected by USDA, and actually transport the cow. Now we have options to do that. Before we just said, no, you had to buy the cow and figure out a way to get those costs already in that price of the cow. But now we have ways to do that. So you would have to use the government mileage rate. This year, it's 53.5 cents a mile, I believe. But so if you went to, you know, 50 miles away to go get this cow and transport it back, that would be your mileage you would use for that. Okay, this is where people got confused a little bit, and it's a little tricky. I apologize, but it is the important thing to remember is at least 80% has to be used for food, 20%, the other 20 can be used for other costs. But only half of that 20%, which is 10%, of your total cost can be used for sourcing. The Rules Committee wanted to put a little bit more restriction on that. They just didn't feel, they felt labor, transportation, and processing was a little bit more value, so you could use up to your 20% pot there, but only half of it, not all 20%, could be used for sourcing, and that would mean like paying somebody to find the food. This happens a lot in remote areas of Oregon, Eastern Oregon, whatever, that they can't find the food, so they might have help with a nonprofit to say, help me find food, help me line it up, help me get contracts with farmers, whatever. So now you can help hire somebody to do that, but you can only use 10% of your funds to do that. So yeah, if you add up, it's not 80 plus 20 plus 10, which would add up to 110%. It's 80-20, but half of the 20 you could use for this category. So, which brings us to the reimbursement process. Now that we've gone through the allowable and unallowable costs. So first thing you need to do is retain your invoices. Don't send them to me. I'll recycle them if you do. So just what you would do is make a copy of your invoice that has local items on there. Hopefully the vendor can put Oregon item on it. They haven't really done that yet. They're getting better at identifying their Oregon product. But if they don't, you can highlight the item, or you can use a report that they give you that says, here's all of our Oregon items. So just make copies of the invoice and keep them on hand. I think the next slide says, so start a file for whatever period you're doing. So if you're doing a monthly claim period, for instance, you could, like, for instance, for September, you could say, okay, here are my September claims. I have copies of my invoices. Everything is highlighted. And then you could print out a copy of your claim form that you submit and put it in there and keep that all together. And so then you send in an electronic Excel worksheet, and that's the only thing you send to me. I look it over, approve it, and tell you to enter the amount in EGMs. Yeah, that's what the next one says. Yeah, so I look it over, and I tell you, you're good to go. Enter the dollar amount in EGMs. I will fill out the form. I'll show you how I do it at the end, but I will send it back to you with with the last tab will be filled out with your balance of how much more you have left. Okay, so this is what the form looks like for those of you who haven't seen it. It's different than last year's. It mirrors more closely the education grant. There's more. Last year, I think we just had 2 tabs. We had an instructions tab and a tab to enter the stuff on. This year we have 2 tabs to enter stuff on. So anyway, the first tab is the instructions tab. You don't add anything on this tab. I think I only got 2 people that tried to do that last year. But basically, you'll open it up and there will be the instructions tab. There's examples on there. I like you to use that format of apples, Fuji. Please don't put punctuation like commas if you can. I know you will anyway in some cases. I take all the data from these forms and I put them on a master sheet for sorting and resorting. And last year I had 40,000 lines. So it's a lot of data. And it really helps out if I put it, it kind of looks backwards, but like apples Fuji rather than Fuji apples, that helps out a lot. Or beef, ground chub patties, or Painted Hills rather than Painted Hills ground beef. You know, if you do it, that's fine. I'm not going to give it back to you to have you redo it. I will redo it, but it just makes it a little easier if the masses do this. People did a pretty good job with this last year, so that helps out. So you put in the information like that, and then you save it in the format, and I use Lebanon as an example there. If you save it as your first claim, like 1_ Lebanon, the month, the year, and then when I keep them all together, they all line up really nicely. And if you don't send it that way, that's fine. I'll rename it so it will be like your first claim, your second claim, your third claim, and I'll do it in the month receipt. I got it, just so it, you know, it has a month and a date on there. But that's the format I use. So if you guys use it, hey, that'll be great. But there's that. So let's go to the next slide. The next slide is the actual, you know, the first one was the instruction. This is the actual tab where you put all your food items on. So basically you'll have the date of your invoice, the vendor on there, and that's like your distributor or your farmer or whoever. Now, people, like I'd say about 80% of the people filled out the secondary source column. If you happen to know, like for instance, let's say on the example there, duck produce, you get strawberries, and you happen to know, it might say on the invoice from Stallbush Farms in Corvallis, then you could put the secondary source. That helps out so much, because a lot of times it'll just say strawberries from duck and you don't know where they came from. And if you don't know, that's fine. You don't know, I don't expect you to call up the vendor and ask. But if you do know, if it just takes a millisecond to throw that in there, that helps me out. Now, obviously, if you buy like directly from a farmer, or in the case Stallbush Farms here, you would leave the second part blank anyway. There is no secondary source, so that's fine. So anyway, the date, the vendor, the secondary source, if you know it, the item, and then the total cost on the invoice for the item. And then the next column is 3 choices. It's either Oregon grown, Oregon processed, or Oregon grown and processed. So I kind of keep track of categories there. And then the very last column is the estimated pounds for fresh produce items only. And so any fresh produce like apples, lettuce, you know, carrots or whatever, it's kind of neat. I was able to say to Oregon legislature last year that we did like 40 tons of produce that we bought this grant. So we don't ask you to weigh anything, but just an estimated, like, you know what a case of apples costs, and you just keep a list on hand of things you regularly buy. It's pretty easy to do, but just estimated pound for produce items only, no other items. Next. Okay, and now this is, if you look at the other arrow, it says there's another other tab there, and this is what it looks like. So this is the other price cost category. There's some examples on there, like I said, labor, mileage, and some processing equipment is on there, like a mandolin. So basically anything like labor for processing food, mileage, anything would go in the green section in the middle. That section's a lot longer. I collapsed it just for the purpose of the video so I could show you guys. You can obviously add lines just like you guys always have on any of the 2 tabs. That's fine. You can just add tabs and it'll add up, and I'll make sure the formula still goes. But everything in the green section would be labor, all that other stuff. The yellow would be for sourcing, labor for sourcing or anything like that only. So it would go in the yellow section. So that is how I keep track of everything. Now, all these items will roll up to the next tab, which is the total. I ask that you don't put anything in this tab. It will all roll up to it, and then I will look at any previous claims you guys have, and I will make sure I add them in the previous claims section there, and I will email it back to you with your remaining balance. It'll be in the green box, will be a total of your remaining dollars you have, and I'll keep track of your other costs there. You know, like you can go up to 20% and up to 10% of the 2 different areas, and it's not 20 and 10 added together, so it's a little tricky on my app, but I'll make sure it's correct and I'll send that back to you with the message for you to enter that dollar amount for the claim into EGMS. So if you're reviewed, we will figure out a percentage of all of the 131 districts to review, and I will choose them at random. Last year I used my Mariners baseball hat and had Chris Fasha pick names out of the hat. That's how I did it. Kind of cool. So I picked a certain amount, and then my assistant, Ren, did a desk audit. So basically what we will ask you to do is we will say, hey, grab one of your claims, one of your files I told you to set up. We'll say we will pick one at random, like let's say, we will take October's claim that you submitted. You would either scan them and email them to me, or just mail me copies, or fax them, or whatever. Send them to us, myself and my assistant, who I have yet to hire, and then we'll do a desk audit and make sure you're squared away. And so that's how we'll do that. If you need some help getting local items, there is some stuff on our resources tab on our website. Like I said, call your distributor you already use. Try your local nonprofits. We have some in Central Oregon, the Central Oregon Food Hub. We have Rogue Valley Farm to School in Southern Oregon. We have Willamette Farm and Food Coalition in Eugene area. We have EcoTrust in the Portland area. We have the National Farm to School, Oregon Farm to School Network, which Megan Kemple heads up, that is able to help somewhat based on her funding. So there are some options there for you to get help as well. And also we have a thing called Food Hub, and there's a link right there on the page. If you click on it, it goes to the Food Hub, which looks like this. You have to sign up by putting in your email, and that's the only thing you have to do. It's pretty painless, but basically it shows these are all the Oregon Harvest for Schools items that we have on our Oregon Harvest for Schools website, but it has 36 fruits and veggies on here. There's not meat and dairy items, or anything like that yet. But basically you click on one of the items and you put in how many miles, like a mile radius from your location, like 50 miles, 100 miles, whatever, and it'll list all the local farms and outfits in your area that sells that particular item, and it has a phone number, email, whatever, ordering system, whatever. So it's kind of a slick thing. So that was me talking very fast for 40 minutes, and we have a Q&A, like I said. Any questions we take now, we will copy them down and any new questions will be put on our frequently asked questions document, and I'll update that on our website. And I will add to that as we get more questions. And in fact, yeah, it says right now, if you're shy and you don't want to put something in now and want to send me a private email, you can do that too, and I will take that there. Okay, so I will hand it over to Karen, and she will moderate questioning.
Okay, the first question we have is, can you please direct us to the Excel spreadsheet?
Yes, it is on the, if you go to the Farm to School website and look in there is a grant, there's the grant requirements. I think it's right in the middle of the page, and then there's a resources section, and right in the resources section it'll say Excel form. Yeah, it's right there in the resources section on the grad website on the left hand side.
Okay, next question is, if the vendor sends a monthly summary of farm to school eligible items with costs and how many we purchased included, can that summary still be used in place of the actual invoices?
Yes, it can be used not as in place of the, I know you know this, but I'm just saying it again, but it can't be used in place of the Excel claim worksheet, but it can be used in place of invoices. And I'll just say, however, you still need to go through that, and we need to make sure all the, you'll put all those items, you'll copy and paste them and put them on the Excel worksheet, and that's fine, but we just need to make sure that they're really qualifying items. But yes, you can.
And that looks to be the last question. At this point in time, we do not have any more questions.
Let's wait a little while. Maybe someone will be speaking.
So at this point in time, we are going to mute the line for a few moments to make sure that there are no more questions that will be coming in. We'll be back on the line in about 2 minutes.
Question. Just to clarify, is Fran's bread still able to be classified? And no, under the rules now, bread, buns, and rolls aren't allowable unless the company, in this case Fran's, could say that they have Oregon wheat in their product. And if that remains to be seen. So if they are able to say, no, we do have some Oregon wheat in there, then yes, they would be eligible. But as it stands now, my understanding is they do not.
All right, and with that, at this point in time, we have no more questions, so that will conclude the webinar. Oh, actually, one more just popped in. Rick, I'll go ahead and ask the question. Last year, we switched from purchasing a non-local pizza to a local because of the grant. If we continue to purchase this pizza, will it qualify?
Yeah, because that's more than minimally processed. It's not just cut chop, but pizza would be a good example. I think I even have that in there, but that would be an allowable cost.
Okay. Hope we've answered all your questions. If not, please feel free to email them directly to Rick. And again, at this time, we will end the conference call. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.